What's up, everyone? It's Esther and Zoe here, and welcome to Vision and Alchemy. Whether you're new to the path of self-discovery or you've been on this journey for a while, Esther and I are here to support and inspire you every step of the way. Buckle up, my friends, because we're about to embark on the adventure of a lifetime. Vision and Alchemy starts now. Hello, everybody. This is Zoe and Esther, and we are the Vision and Alchemy podcast.
Hello.
Yay! Thank you so much for tuning in. We are here with episode 7.
Nailed it.
Yeah, I was like, we just literally discussed this. I was like, was it number 7? Number 7, guys. Oh my God, we're ramping up. We are just a steam train on the track with no controller, out of control. I don't know where that analogy is going, but we are feeling good. We're sitting down and we're just hopefully recording some magic for all of you. And today's episode topic will be about slowing down.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I feel like even as I said that topic or that sentence, slowing down, I feel like everyone listening would have had like a different, visceral, physical response to that word.
Yes. Oh,
it's
my
like
God.
a loaded word these days. Hey,
it really is. Oh. I think as well, like if you think about your life right now and you're feeling a little bit like, oh, like this isn't living, or like I could have more out of life, or if you're just in a point where you're just like you can't stop and you feel like if you do you'll die, like, and you want to get out of that place, the hardest thing to do but the most important thing to do and the first step in that like process is slowing down, or at least identifying like where you can slow down and stuff like that. So, but yeah, like what Zoe just said, I think it's such a loaded word. And should we like touch on different feelings people might have when they hear it?
Yeah. So Esther and I have both experienced our own gnarly burnout, probably multiple times too. I know in my experience multiple times. So I definitely feel like we can put our expert hat on with this, but we can only share from our personal experience as well. But we will, try and guide you guys as best you can about where you might be now if you're hearing that word and feeling particular stress-related responses, or congratulations if you're on the other side and feeling quite good about it. So yeah, the term slowing down, I feel like, what do you reckon? Like a lot of people would just be feeling, what's the term? Like rejecting that term almost.
Yeah.
Like, oh, that's a foreign language to me,
Yeah.
a foreign concept.
Yes. I feel like it would really depend like where you are on the spectrum of how like fast you're moving in life and how much you have going on. Like some people might hear slowing down and just be like, oh my God, yes, like I want that. I need that. They might be at that point of like, holy fuck, I'm ready. And then there would be some people who are just like, no, like don't even want to listen to this episode. Like I don't have time to slow down and I'm not even going to bother listening.
Yeah.
Because this isn't going to help me at this moment, whatever. Which I think if that is you, stay nearby, because this will help even future you. I think that some people would, tense at the shoulders even thinking about it. Some people would think how unrealistic. Some people would think, oh my God, like I want to, but I can't. Like the way the world is, and just feel a little bit like held down underwater by society, because it's like, how am I supposed to slow down?
And this is like happening on a huge collective level, like the whole experience of slowing down right now. And I feel like the pandemic a few years ago was a huge, like, it was painful as well, like a huge painful moment of everyone being like, what am I even doing? Like I genuinely remember, it's not a genuine remembrance, I'm just remembering. But around the time COVID happened was, we were obviously being told to stay home and slow down, like losing jobs and everything like that. And I remember making a coffee at home and drinking it out of a mug in my kitchen. And I was like, I actually don't remember the last time I've had my morning beverage not in my travel cup, because I would literally be up and out the door every day for work or study or anything related to that career at the time. Like at the time the pandemic happened, I was still working in academic research as a marine biologist. So like fully running the gauntlet. And then I also had another job because I was saving up to go to Sri Lanka, and I was just, like all of us, just, absolutely pushing the limits. And I just remember when the pandemic happened, I was like, I'm sitting still And I'm like, use like literally there was dust on my mugs in my kitchen because it was always like the travel mug out the door, like going to wherever I was going.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like those little indications that you need to slow down can come in really interesting ways, like how you choose to have your morning beverage, basically.
Yeah. I think the pandemic as well, and I don't want this to sound insensitive to people who have like lost someone from COVID and stuff like that,
Mm,
but I honestly see it as a really big blessing in disguise for humanity for a few reasons. Like, I think typically social media, obviously, like we know that takes up a lot of our brain space, a lot of energy and everything, makes you feel exhausted because you're like absorbing like billions of people's worth of information into your own brain at like in tiny little bursts. And, you can get stuck in scroll traps and stuff like that. So like it's quite an exhausting thing. But before COVID, the way they would roll out new changes was like a lot more gradual. It was a lot more, things they wanted us to just sort of get used to were not so blaringly obvious, like, oh, there is a new change with how we do things on social media now. It was a way more gradual process. And then when COVID happened and we were all inside, we were on our phones a lot more. And people like that was the only way everyone had to like connect with someone else and to feel like we were like, okay, like what's going on in the world, bit scary, things are happening. Um, so during that COVID time, especially with the like rise of TikTok and everything, they started to implement, new changes a lot faster. And people, I think like, at the time they were probably like, sweet, everyone's at home on their phone, like great opportunity to start like, implementing this next thing that will keep people more engaged and spend more time on their phone and everything. But the blessing there was that I think everyone had this like moment of like, it's too much. Like after like a couple of years of just, like everyone was inside through that like main sort of COVID point of time. But then, people started to work from home more in general. The world was sort of shifting. We spent more time slowing down, not moving so quickly. Like people were taking time to go outside for like an exercise situation because that was the only time they were allowed to or whatever. And, sort of starting to remember all the things about like just being a human. And I think there was just way too much time spent on phones to the point where everyone got a little bit like, oh, like super addicted to it, but way more aware of their addiction to it. I think there's just been this like, people are now like, oh, I am absolutely fucking addicted to my phone or whatever,
mm,
instead of not realizing it. Yeah, and I just think there's been so many good things that have come from COVID, as well as obviously bad things. But people were forced to shift out of their comfort zone and
mm.
realign their lives and do all sorts of stuff. So it's a good thing and a bad thing.
Exactly. And then touching on like the collective shift of our relationship with the pace of life, I suppose that's what we're commenting on in this episode. As millennials, I think as well, we have really copped the brunt of this like generational what would you call it, like line in the sand moment. So we've come from, I'm sure all you've observed your parents, like literally Esther and I were voice messaging this morning about like, oh yeah, do you remember when it'd be that go to school phase in the morning and you're trying to get everyone out the door, and I love you, mum, so much if you're listening. Like, this is no disrespect to you, but my mum was a single mum working two jobs, trying to get two girls out the house. A lot of the times, not even to school, just to like a friend's house to drop us to school, because that's how early mum had to start work. And I still have such a strong memory of that morning rush and that morning anxiety of like, shit, like gotta get going sort of thing. So I'm just commenting on that memory because like literally Esther and I were talking about it this morning. But I'm sure a lot of us can reflect on times with our families throughout our childhood or our teenage years where there was just a lot of stress, and that's no disrespect to the baby boomers and older generations, but I'm just commenting on like, like our grandparents and our parents were kind of not questioning the pace of life as much as we have as this generation.
Mm.
And that may have been the pandemic or just us kind of like basically observing the adults around us just running the gauntlet, completely stressed out, completely dysregulated, and us like actually kind of being like, you know what? Actually, I don't really want to do it like that. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And then that's like a whole kettle of fish as well, because we've decided that and we had that line in the sand moment. But it doesn't mean that I haven't felt immense amount of guilt for wanting to do it differently as well. And I've literally
Yeah.
had to have like direct conversations with mum being like, like, I feel like I'm letting you down because I'm trying to walk like this more intentional path sort of thing. And mum's like, oh my God, do not do it my way. Like, I am fully in support of you doing it the way that you want to, because yes, we've been that generation to be like, you know what, we're going to try things differently. And we're so lucky. We've got the advantages of the internet. So we can like produce this podcast, or Esther and I both work remotely. Like, we have things available to us now that have helped us question the pace of life. You know what I
Mm.
mean? So I'm not criticizing the older generations. Like, I can't believe you even like didn't question that, because they just genuinely didn't have the resources and the technology to do it any differently.
Yeah. Plus, up until our generation, they've like, there's been, I think tradition has been held as this like really important thing. And I just know that like in the older generations and before them, obviously, it's been like, just do it as we did it. And then if you
Mm.
do it this way, you won't die or whatever. If you put it down to like just the basic, the way
Mm.
the evolution or your brain or whatever. So I think our generation was very much like, how about we,
No.
I don't know, just try something a bit different, and we don't do we don't follow tradition as much. And it's not to say that, things that have come before are no good. It's just that obviously we need to rewire
Mm.
so much that's been ingrained into us and everything.
Exactly. And yeah, so we're not dissing on other generations. We can only speak for our generation, which is, the millennials. And yeah, and us just being like, and I think I mentioned in episode 1, like our introduction episode, how I've, basically spent my 20s going through uni and all of the pressure and expectations that come with that. And just, yeah, even in my own journey, just being like, I can't keep doing this. And I think
Mm.
I commented when I was in my marine biology career, I was incredibly grateful to have that job. But that job that I was in had an expiration date, because I was going to have to up level my education and my career, which meant a lot more on my plate, a lot more sacrifice financially, mentally, time wise, everything. And I was looking down the barrel of like, but I'm already so stressed out. And I'm like, I don't know if I mentioned it in episode 1, but I had completely normalized just going to this particular disabled bathroom and just bawling my eyes out, because I was
Mm.
just that stressed out. But I didn't know anything different. I thought that was normal. I was like, yeah, everyone just like goes and cries in the bathroom when they're super stressed out and they literally don't have 1 second spare. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And then the weight and the expectations are just getting higher and higher. So yeah, it's
Yes.
mm,
I watched a video on TikTok. I think it was like last night. It was this person just being like, like me in my 20s and walking along being like, I've done these 5 things today and now I'm going to go rest until, tomorrow, and I'll start again, and just feeling fine about life. And then it was her now at like 27, just like laying on the couch, just being like, well, I did this one thing wrong, and then the weight of disappointment just came crashing down. I never have any time to like slow down. And, I just feel so guilty for laying here. And, I couldn't even cook myself dinner. So I ordered takeout, and that's really expensive. And I really need to save money because it's so hard to stay alive. And I really just don't know how I'm going to survive. And does anyone else feel like this? And obviously the video is like viral because everyone's like, fucking oath, we feel like that.
yeah, yeah.
And like that normalizing that you were just talking about made me think of that, because it's like, yeah, I think most people feel like that.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And that's
And
normal right now, which is not normal for us as a species. That's not normal. We shouldn't.
yeah,
And it's not to say that you're not normal, you're alone. Like, no,
mm,
we all feel that way, but we really shouldn't.
yeah.
It's not how we need to be living.
Yeah, and even with like the big rise of online entrepreneurs and like, oh, I'm going to work from my laptop in Bali sort of vibe, that boss girl era, that's already burnt out. Like, everyone worked really hard for a really long time and they're like, actually, I don't have some like toxic manager breathing down my throat and I'm just working for myself. Why am I working so hard? Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
Like, so it's just, we're kind of commenting on different like collective perceptions of of choosing a pace of life. And even this new shiny, like, I work online, like, I'm an entrepreneur. It doesn't have to be online, but like, I'm an entrepreneur, I have a business or whatever. A lot of people had like this big spike of this entrepreneurial, like, yeah, I'm going to hustle for a few years and then I'll be able to like retire and slow down. Like, it still doesn't work like that. And Esther and I have experienced that as well, like both running
Mm.
our own businesses in the last few years and then both last year closing them down, or maybe I was the start of this year, but just being like, you go into entrepreneurship, yeah,
Mm.
for the freedom, and then you realize I still have all of this horrible conditioning around toxic productivity. And
Mm-hmm.
you were given all this freedom, but it was a double-edged sword because you didn't actually open up the lid and look at the way your relationship with productivity and your relationship with the pace of life and relaxing and feeling deserving of it and all of that. So it's
Yeah.
funny because we all moved out of these jobs like, yeah, the 9 to 5 sucks and I had this horrible manager, but no one actually did that inner work or that self-discovery to move through all the conditioning from so many years of being in that toxic workplace. And then they
Yes.
started businesses and just kept the toxic, habits and traits going. And it's
Became
like,
their own shitty boss.
yeah, exactly. And we can laugh about it now, but like Esther and I have both completely fallen apart in that sense. And it was really hard and horrible. It was like losing a part of ourselves sort of thing. But now we've kind of come to the other side of it. We're like, oh, what a funny little cosmic joke that was. And by no means was it funny at the time.
No. But what you were just saying, when we think of like, because we did go through that, and like now doing like what we're doing together, like
Mm,
this all feels so good and so aligned. Like,
yeah.
and I was saying to Zoe last night that I've never felt this way about like a business or a project or something that I'm working on, because previously it's always been like there's a hard period where you have to work really hard, there's a slog, and then you get over like this little hump, and then it's like a lot easier, a lot more rewarding, and then you start to find like a lot more excitement in it or whatever, and it's not such a punish. But this has just been so aligned from the outset that it's just felt incredible the entire way. It's just been so packed full of joy, and it's been easy. It's not been difficult for a fucking second.
Mm,
And I was like, oh my God, like we're so in alignment right now. But what you
mm,
were just saying brought me back to that, thinking like, oh, obviously because we went through all of that and we have been reconditioning the way that we see the world. And we were like, vowed from before we started even doing this, that when we do work together on this sort of stuff, we're going to do it from a place of truth, energy. And then Zoe, also, I think you should touch on the feminine energy cycle, because I was just thinking when you were talking, I was thinking about the masculine and the boss bitch era and stuff like that. So I think women were obviously like, we're kind of climbing out of oppression slowly but surely.
mm.
And I think there was this whole like, oh, like we can take the world by the balls ourselves as well. So then you're like, fuck yeah, I'm a boss bitch. And you step into like this masculine, get the shit done kind of vibe. But it's like, Zoe taught me something the other day about feminine energy. And I was like, well, of course that doesn't suit us.
Yeah.
And that energy in general, like we can run businesses from a place of beautiful, soft,
Yeah.
energy that really suits who you are and suits your
Yeah.
vibe.
Yeah. And is from a place of aligned action rather than obligation. And
Mm.
I think I mentioned in our Tall Poppies episode that we tried to record, like we had a, I think it was last week at this point in time, we tried to record, Esther had driven down and everything, and it just couldn't land. And I wanted to mention it because I was just so proud of us being like, you know what? We're not going to do this because, and now we're touching on this as like a slowing down or your relationship with productivity. That was really important for us because we've both, come from very, crazy workloads. And then, as we mentioned, took that conditioning into our entrepreneurship
Entrepreneurship.
journey. So the fact like this is basically our first healthy project.
Yeah, legit.
You know
And
what I
it's
mean? So
incredible.
yeah, it probably didn't mean much for you guys, but the fact that we were like had this intention and it didn't land and could just so confidently be like, you know what? Today's not the day, and we're really trusting that. That was huge for both of us because we are
Mm.
still deconditioning from hustle culture and
Yeah.
learning to slow down. And I was talking to my housemate about this the other day because she's just moved into a job that's actually quite a healthy workplace. And she was basically, her manager was like, you don't have to be busy all the time. Like, you're always looking for work, sort of thing. And she was like, oh, okay. And she's come from a previous workplace that, like, even if she blew her nose, sort of thing, she'd get in trouble. Like, she would literally get yelled at by the manager. Like, we've all been there, sort of thing. And I was talking about like, oh, I totally understand, because she's like, oh, now I'm in like a good workplace, or I've got the opportunity to redefine my relationship with my pace of life, but I'm still holding on to that fear and that anxiety of like not doing enough or not being good enough. And I just shared my experience because I've had basically 80 to 100% freedom in my schedule for years now, and I will still catch myself like feeling guilty or putting too much on my plate or whatever. So it's just, we're kind of touching on the other side of when you realize you need to slow down, but it's not a destination, it's an absolute journey. And we're not saying this like it's a hard slog, it's a lot of work. It's just this gentle self-awareness every day of like, oh, look at that, like I'm shallow breathing, or I don't feel like my nervous system is regulated, or why do I feel like I need to do a certain amount, So yeah, that's why we mentioned that little win of like, this podcast is so therapeutic for us because it is an opportunity to walk the walk, because we've been talking the talk for ages of redefining that relationship with productivity, learning to slow down, feeling safe, regulating our nervous system. But that's talking the talk. And now we have an actual opportunity to apply that deconditioning and apply that new awareness that we have. And then when we're actually like actioning it, we're like, yes, we're
So
awesome.
rewarding.
Yeah. And I remember Esther was editing one of our last podcast this week, and she was like, oh my God, sorry, I totally forgot to do it after our actual job. So after a full day of work, by the way. She's like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And we're kind of keep being like, when one or the other is feeling like we're, feeling that trigger of like linking our worthiness to our level of productivity, I'm like, yeah, it's all good. I was like, we actually didn't announce a day that this was going to be edited because it's literally our second week of the podcast. And the fact that we can even create a little bit of space to be like, let's just see how it flows. You know what I mean? Like, you don't usually get that freedom in jobs, or if you haven't done the proper deconditioning from like the hustle culture, you don't actually ever allow yourself to be like, oh, just edit it tomorrow. Like we're just figuring it out as we go. Like,
this just made me think, because that, like, to me, that's like a huge accountability thing. Like, we're helping each other out with that because we have the same goal, and we're keeping each other accountable to stay on, I guess, this track of, just moving along in alignment. And it made me think we should maybe just suggest, if anyone's listening to this, if you feel like you need to slow down, and you look at one of your friends and you're like, oh, like, she really needs to slow down, or they really need to slow down, or he really needs to slow down, whatever. Maybe this is an opportunity to talk to them about like, hey, could we keep each other accountable? And you don't have to like check in every day or whatever, but in those moments when you are panicking about work, or you wake up and it's literally the first thing you think about, and you instantly have that like, that your nervous system just goes, like you can just feel it in your chest, and you, like Zoe said, you start the shallow breathing and stuff, and you start just overthinking your work day when you should really be just, having a beautiful, peaceful morning start to the day kind of thing. In those moments, maybe like message your accountability friend or something like that, or talk to them so that they can tell you later that you're not a shit person and that it's okay, and just like help guide you out of it. So I think the accountability has been so good.
Yeah, exactly. So I suppose that's a good segue to start giving little tips and hints for those who have heard this term, slowing down, and they're like, what language you speak? You know what I mean? Like,
Error.
if you are currently in a season of life where you're like, I genuinely don't understand what slowing down is, or I feel like, if you feel like disempowered about that, like, oh no, I couldn't possibly do that, maybe we should touch on particular things that we did or wish we did. Because it's not like we navigated this super gracefully when we did it, but hopefully by turning around and offering this advice for you guys, you can do it a little bit better than we did. So yeah, do you, Esther, have any tips for those first little moments where you're really kind of washing that term slowing down around in your aura and in your mouth, like, oh, could I do it?
So I was, already in, so I'm a high energy person. So this is the other thing, like, so you've got to really listen to yourself and who you are as a person. So keeping in mind that this is coming from someone who's really high energy, and I take on a lot, I do a lot, like, but I was at a point where I didn't actually realize that there was a limit of what I should take on. I just, because I could, I did, you know what I mean? And I was doing so many different things, and had been in burnout for like a year and a half, like minimum already, before it got to the point where my body started to literally tell me about it and start forcing me into slowing down. So, I had like my business, and I was working crazy hours and flying in and out of Sydney, and just like thinking like, oh my God, like it's everything I ever wanted. My photos are in vogue, and I'm, flying out to these amazing like things, and, just, oh my God, I made it. But then also at the exact same time as that, I was like, I fucking hate it here. Like, this is hell. I was like, I need to slow down. And then I started having these like my thoughts started circulating just around like, this isn't living, this isn't living, this is not living. And I was like, I just want to lay down outside and just look at a tree. I want to chase butterflies. Like I just had like nature just started screaming in my ears and calling me. And I was like, but I can't. And then like that frustration of just like, if I don't stop, I'll die. I mean, if I stop, I'll die. But if I don't stop, I'll die. I was like, what do I do? Like I just felt like I was caught between a rock and a hard place. And I looked at my business and I was like, starting to think like, oh my God, like how do I change it? How do I make it more in line with me? How do I, and I started spitballing ideas with friends. Like maybe maybe I move out of weddings and just into something more chill. Maybe I, change it to just be more my personality and aesthetic. And that would be more energizing. And maybe this, maybe that. And that, I guess, was my brain. Like now looking back, that was my energy, everything, just my higher self. Anything was, my whole body was like, hey, like start looking for a way out of this. And I started to have like very physical effects of the burnout. So my hair started falling out. I started just trembling all the time. I don't remember if I ever really knew how to breathe properly. I was a very shallow breather my entire life. And if I took in a full deep breath, so if you're also a shallow breather, take a deep breath in right now. You might feel your lungs feel like it's actually hard work and they tremble a little bit. I was talking to a friend the other day and she said that she gets the same thing. She's always like, she's the same personality. She's go, go, go. She's, and she's also a shallow breather and lots of stress. And I was like, take a deep breath. And she was like, that freaks me out because it's like this trembling lung thing. And I was like, dude, same. I used to panic. I would listen to some meditation thing and they'd be like, all right, breathe in. And I was like, I don't like it. It makes me stress because it hurts and it feels weird and I'm not used to breathing. And I would get anxious about being told to breathe. And yeah, so that's just like a huge, huge sign that you really, 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 really need to slow down and practice breathing. Now I don't have that. I breathe through my nose. If I catch myself shallow breathing, I'm like, oh, and I use it as a flag to identify like, wow, how am I feeling right now? What's going on? And other than that, like I feel like I just, actually can take a nice like 6-second breath in and out and that kind of thing. I can't remember the question of what you said, but this is what's coming out.
You answered it.
Okay, great. So these were my identifiers, I guess, of I was like, holy shit, I need to slow down. And then my life just sort of fucking took a massive turn anyway. But
yeah.
That was it.
First, I just want to say, like, I'm still adjusting to being on the camera here, and I'm so sorry for anyone that's been watching the episodes because sometimes I just forget where I am and I'm like using it like a mirror. Like I was like, like I literally just caught myself just then. I was like, oh my God.
It's so funny. I did before I was checking my fringe and I was like,
yeah, I'm like, oh, I'm feeling myself today. Anyway, I will get better at that.
Oh, who cares? Whatever.
But you know what I mean? Like when you're sitting at your laptop working, you're like, people might bite your nails or like play around with your skin. Like that's just what I'm doing because I'm kind of like thinking about something and I'm like, oh yeah, cool. Yeah. And then I like catch myself and I'm like, just like doing a circular motion on my chin. And I'm like, ew.
Whatever.
Anyway, what I asked you was, would you have any advice for people that are like, yeah, I want to slow down, but it scares me and I don't know how to? And you answered that question about like the physical symptoms and the breath thing. And that's a similar experience for me when I was going through, like, I've honestly burnt out multiple times. So my thing was like, it doesn't, like, you guys might be sitting here like, oh yeah, I've got to slow down, but like, I need my job, I've got to pay my bills, I've got a family, blah, blah, blah. The key to this is little micro steps and little, and that consistency. And then even if you can take 5 minutes of your time, like when you pull up at home in the car, like don't get straight out and just sit there sort of thing. So my advice would have been the same as well, because I had moments in my multiple times of burnout where I'd be like behind the counter at work or doing something and I physically couldn't stop. But for me, it was remembering that I could breathe and reconnecting with my breath. And I would be like, I've had panic attacks. I've been that stressed out and burnt out, or emotionally, like I'm a very emotionally sensitive person. So if I can't slow down to like be present with that emotional experience, because the emotions aren't me, but they are so thick that I need, not thick, but anyway, they come through me. I need that stillness to let the emotion, to honor that emotional experience. So when you're doing too much and you're not letting the emotions come through, I'd be having full-blown panic attacks because it was just too much. Like it was too much. My body's like, no, you're not honoring it. Thing. So I would have these moments where I'd be like borderline panic attack and I'd be behind the counter and there'd be like 10 people lining up to like take a payment or something. And I remember I'd be sitting there and I'd be like, the only thing I can control right now is my breath. And I do the same as you. And it would be so foreign to me to start doing like deep belly breaths. Like for me, you know how you were saying I got the tremble lung thing? Mine was this like, you can't see because but this like resistance between my rib cage and my stomach. So it could have been like a diaphragm thing. Like I never understood the actual physiological thing of it, but it was like I was so disconnected from getting oxygen and like getting down to my navel and belly breathing and getting it
Mm.
the whole way up. And it was interesting because I have started doing yoga this year, which has been a really beautiful practice to, you know, come back to your breath. And it's great. And so I do yoga and qigong, and it's really beautiful. And I bring it back out to my day because throughout the day I might be doing the dishes and I'll catch myself like doing that shallow breathing, being really up in my chest, and then I'll like bring it down back down to my stomach. But I just mentioned that practice because that similar to you, and you're like learning to breathe deeply again, it feels really foreign, and it's literally like your like all the little fascias and all of that in your I say it's your diaphragm or your lungs or your, you know, esophagus, whatever it is still like learning to expand. So it's not about forcing this big deep breath into you because that's not going to regulate your nervous system either. I got some great advice that just like act like your lungs, or if it's your stomach, wherever you're feeling that resistance to taking a deeper breath, um, to just treat it like it's a balloon. So you don't just like, you know, say you're blowing it up with your mouth, you don't just go like and do this huge from like a flat flaccid balloon to like a full blown one. It's about just like tiny little breaths just to allow like that elasticity almost to come back, sort of thing. So don't stress yourself out trying to reconnect with your breath, and just do big deep breaths because you're going to get the same effect for your nervous system, you know? So
Mm.
yeah, it's cool. I had like a similar experience where it's really scary, guys. Like it's really scary when you realize like, oh my God, whether it's this podcast that's the trigger, or like, you know, a sickness, or all of these, you know, setbacks happening in your life, in whatever, if you don't listen to the whispers of your life or your body or your experience with life asking you and begging you to slow down, you will have to deal with the screams, and the
Mm.
screams will be different. So like Esther's were different, mine were different, etc. But it's really scary to realize it because you're like, oh my God, I'm on this trajectory and it's horrible and I won't survive it, sort of thing. Like Esther said, I will
Yeah.
die if I stop, but I die if I don't, sort of thing. It's a really scary experience. So just be super, super kind to yourself. And the reason it's scary is because you have slowly conditioned your body and your mind into this state of believing that your productivity is linked to your worthiness. And the only way to feel worthy is to do a certain amount of things every single day.
Mm.
So it's a really scary aha moment to have. And you might have had it on this podcast, or you might have already had it, or it might not come yet. But just be really kind to yourself, because it's not like you can completely change everything straight away. But this is where those little micro habits of like I said, when I was borderline having a panic attack at a busy work desk, all I could do, all I control was just try and have some deep breaths into my stomach. And I still so vividly remember the moment. I was like, holy, that was so potent. And I was like,
Mm.
oh, I can get through the rest of this shift and then go home and cry. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you know, these big changes aren't going to happen overnight, but by no means are you not in a place of empowerment to do something about it.
Yeah. And honestly, like I feel like if people hear Zoe have just said that and be like, you're not in a place where, like, I know it feels like you can't. And I know it feels like if you stop doing the thing you're doing right now, or stop having that job or whatever it is, that your literal world will just fucking fall apart beneath your feet. And like, what could you possibly do if you didn't do that? And how could you possibly pay for the things? And like, it just feels like you will absolutely just drop dead. Like, I get it. There's always a road somewhere, and you'll find it if you start to slow at least your thoughts down. If you can't physically slow your life down yet, slowing your thoughts down is like, you have control over that. And I know it feels like you don't, but you do. And also on that note, I just want to share something. I had this like random thing pop in my head, and I really want to share it with everyone because it's kind of on this topic. And can you just keep talking, because I'm not going to edit this out. So feel free to talk about whatever, and I'll just jump back in eventually.
Yeah. Awesome. So yeah, when Esther was just talking just then, it kind of just reminded me to mention the benefits of slowing down. Obviously, it just feels good. It's like an intuitive, like aha moment. Your body, your mind, everything is just like, ah. So when you allow some stillness in your life, and as we've been mentioning for the last like 40 minutes, it does take some time to allow that slowing down. But once you start experiencing the benefits of it, those will include, as Esther mentioned, this stillness, this calmness in your mind, and just this, your mind becomes a place you actually enjoy being in again. Or if you find yourself going kind of on a negative spiral and like, you know, getting stressed and anxious again, you've created enough pockets of stillness within your experience that you can quickly catch yourself and start winding back up on this upwards trajectory of thoughts and beliefs, etc. Also, when you start slowing down again, your experience and your relationship with your emotions really improve as well, because you're not so reactive, because you've slowed down enough to create enough space between, say, the trigger, like the thing that's triggering you, and your actual response. Whereas when you're so tightly wound, you start treating everyone like shit, basically. Like if you're, you know, rushing out the door in the morning and your partner's like in the doorway or something, you're like, oh, get out of the way. Like you're no good to anyone when you're too tightly wound. So, and we'll touch on like that whole like slowing down might be a selfish thing, or self-care being a selfish thing, because it's not, because you're no good to anyone when you're too tightly wound. So when you start creating a bit of space and stillness and slowing down in your life, you create these little pockets to really improve your relationship with your emotional experience. And rather than reacting, you start responding, and you're like, not, and you won't actually experience all of those lower emotions as much. So like anxiety, frustration, resentment, stress, anger, etc., because you've actually just created enough time to be like, take a breath between your partner being in the doorway and taking a breath and being like, hey, my love, I've got to get to work. Could you just, you know, step out of the way? Sort of thing. So your mind starts to become calmer, your relationship with your emotions and that experience of the emotions becomes better. And then there's a whole plethora of physiological changes. And I have mentioned it a lot of times in this episode already, but the major thing is regulating your nervous system, because you will not feel safe in your body, in this present moment, in your experience with life, whatever is in front of you, until your nervous system is regulated. And you cannot possibly regulate your nervous system until you slow down. So that's many of the benefits. And she's back, ladies and gentlemen.
And on what Zoe was just saying, like about being tightly wound and how people are so reactive and everything, a fun experiment, and also like a little, it just will help build compassion as well, is when you're out in the world and you are like communicating with someone, or, you know, you come across someone who is so tightly wound and they're rude to you, and you just feel like, oh my God, like horrible. Like, why would you just treat me like that? Why would you talk to me like that? Why would you even like, just like, oh, they looked at you and you could just feel the hate or whatever seething off them. And, you know, usually it is like you just want to react or you don't, but you feel shit. And it's like, you know, they've passed their shittiness onto you. Instead of like letting that like attach to you, look at them and identify that as like, is this person super tightly wound? Do I get the vibe that they've actually had any chance to stop in the last 10 years of their life? Or are they, you know, just in the same place that I am? And if you look at that and you're just like, oh my God, it's kind of heartbreaking when you see someone like that, like super tightly wound like that, because it's like, oh, they're not living. And then it helps you identify that you are also not living, if that's the case for you, or you can at least have compassion for them and be like, I understand how that feels.
Yeah. And I feel like if you're triggered by someone that seems tightly wound, it's because you are. or you're still redeveloping your relationship with an intentional pace of life. You know what I mean? Like triggers are usually because of something you haven't dealt with within yourself. You know what I mean? Beautiful. Whereas like Esther and I now are, you know, we're pretty good at feeling pretty intentional with life. We've regulated our nervous system, etc. So we could be walking around the shopping center and someone would be really reactive and tightly wound, and I can just be like, I'm going to send you some love, you know, because we don't identify with that anymore. But we
it's not to say you won't initially feel it, but you have the tools then to be like, oh no, I can overcome that.
And this is, Esther and I have gotten to this point now from all of those things I was talking about, all of those little micro moments of like the version of Zoz that was like at the busy work desk about to have a panic attack, having a million things on her plate and just taking 3 deep breaths and being like, oh wow, like that was actually way more potent than I expected. And then just consistently showing up for the last few years to be like, ooh, like maybe I'll like have a sleep in, which is usually like only till 7 anyway, but just the whole like process of not setting alarm, like every little thing has gotten us to this point. And it still doesn't, like I said, I still catch myself sometimes like putting too much on my plate, and then I'm like, hold on, I'm the boss of me now, so like I don't need to do that. But it's like these tiny little micro decisions every day, because that's like literally what your experience with life is just like a shitload of micro decisions every day, and it's either taking you on, you know, the right path or a not so great path.
So I ran off before because I got this book. It's just a creative journal. I write in it, sometimes I draw in it, sometimes like whatever, bit of everything. And if anyone's watching, I'm just gonna put, it's got this like, it says can't stop or I'll die. And I just wrote this like small thing because I only started working out of this like burnout stuff in September last year. So I'm so proud of myself. Like I've done amazingly and I've learned so much, and I have come so far in such a quick amount of time because of all the tools I have had up until this point of like how to get myself out of shitty situations and everything. So I'm really grateful for all the tools that I have, and I'm so happy with how far I've come. But it's still, you know, it feels like such a fresh wound as well. Like when I think about burnout, if I see someone in burnout and I see someone needs to slow down, I initially feel fear for them because I'm like, oh my God, like, and then I feel like pain for them. I'm like, holy shit. And then I'm like, okay, no, like when I was in that place, no one really knew how to get through to me to actually help me identify that I need to slow down. It was my body literally just like starting to die in front of me that I was like, oh, okay. So I wrote this little thing, and I don't know if anyone will get anything from it, but if you hear it and you're like, oh, that's like kind of how I feel, then yeah, I like, it's definitely time, you know, time to start making a really big change in your world. So it says, can't stop or I'll die. Wait, is this the beginning? Sorry, everyone who's just like listening to the page turning. Okay, it says, my vision was starting to blur and my heart was beating out of rhythm. If I could see my own reflection, I'd tell you my lips were going blue, but I can't because I couldn't. They feel blue with their tingle, telling me I'd done a shit job of breathing lately. My chest was quivering with each inhale like it was the hardest thing I'd ever done, to keep breathing. My hands were shaking too much to be able to finish the email I was trying to type to a lawyer. My phone dropped into my lap and I looked out the window of the Uber. Deep, slow, shaky breaths, just breathe. My eyes started to well up and my whole body felt like it was either going to pass out or start crying, but I held it in. I had nowhere to cry. The ride home from work felt like an eternity, and I gathered my emotional shit together along with my handbag and my storm cloud. I thanked the driver, and as I stepped out of the car, I took a deep breath. Or released a deep breath like I'd been holding it in the whole drive. I can't recall. Still shaking and shallowly existing, I floated inside and greeted my teenager with the best attempt of a loving smile, a hug, and retreated to my room. I had about 90 seconds of alone time, silently and uncontrollably quaking, until he approached my door. I didn't mind if he saw me being human, but I'd been pretty fucking human lately, and my pet storm cloud was getting too much for him. I could feel it. I could feel him absorbing me and not knowing how to deal with the toxic waste. My poor kid. Oh, it's going to make me cry. Every day. Oh, God, sorry. Hang on.
It's so funny when you have these really potent reference points. Like you can just really, you just want to go back to that old version of Esther and be like, oh my God, it's going to be okay. Like,
yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's really potent and it's not a thing anymore. It's not a thing anymore. You're here now and you have a beautiful, intentional life, and Noah is soaking up all of the good positivity, and he now has a mum that's regulated and happy and intentional and passionate and everything. So, you know, it's just the extremes of life and the polarity. So yeah,
Thanks.
It must be such a like visceral experience for you rereading this.
Yeah, it is. Every day and every night passed in a dull haze. It was as though I had left my body and was observing my own life through a set of really old, moldy binoculars, keeping a wise distance. I was so afraid of sleep, something I desperately needed and seldom had time for. I'd lay down, and with the landing of my head on the pillow, so the rhythm began. Irregular, fast, loud. I could hear my pulse whisper to me every night. I'd wake up to the same sound, the audible drum of my chest and the whisper of my heart being bullied by my nerves. Stop, 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 it would drum. I told my body it didn't understand, and as my hair fell out more and more each day, I heard it say, "What do you mean?" And I'd reply, "I can't stop or I'll die." And that's it.
Yeah, wow.
That really fucks me up reading that.
Yeah. Yeah, I just want to go
Oh,
back and give that version of Esther a hug and be like,
same.
it's going to be a wild ride from this point onwards, but in like a
That
year
was
or so, you'll be
August
fine.
last year.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. We're coming up. I had that moment. I can't remember what it was for. Oh, actually, no, it was for your birthday. It was for your birthday because remember I came up to the Goldie and I told you dad was sick and he actually
Yes.
passed away like a few days after your birthday. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, so your birthday's on the 24th. And I was like, what has happened? Like this last year has been insanely transformative. And I'm so proud of us. Like we're
Same.
sort of going off topic, but hey, like it's just like it takes some time, guys. Like if you're sitting here receiving what Esther had just written in her journal, like, oh my God, are you, taking the words out of my brain? It's gonna be okay. It's gonna I want to say like it might get worse before it gets better, but it
Mm.
it genuinely needs to happen in that way. And yeah, I suppose I'm feeling called to touch on things that might be getting in your way or causing resistance to wanting to slow down. And I've already mentioned it. Because a big one for me, and Esther, you might have different ones, but a big one for me is linking my worthiness to my level of productivity and
Mm.
just so deeply ingraining in myself and my belief system and my subconscious that I'm only worthy of the things that I do, not just purely by being me
Yeah.
and being still and stuff like that. So that was like a huge thing for me. And I think that came from but like I mentioned with the whole generational thing, like growing up with a mum, love you so much, mum. Like mum's actually kind of like in on my journey now as well. And I share all of my things like, oh, let's slow down, let's meditate, let's like, tap into our spirituality. And she's just like absolutely embraced it like a champ. But I've had to kind of pull her up in the last few years because I grew up with her being like, oh, I'll rest when, and having this never ending to-do list. And I would see her be like, oh, I'm almost at the end of the to-do list. And then like, she wouldn't even realize she's doing it, but then pop a few more things on there. Like, oh no, now I've got to go pick up blah blah from the blah blah sort of thing, and constantly just creating this endless to-do list. And then I will rest when, or I will relax when, but like you're never actually allowing that. It's always like this in the future moment. So
Yes.
there's no disrespect to mum, and like it's just part of growing up and conditioning. Like we're just conditioned by everyone around us. But I think that's where my warped sense of worthiness and productivity came along, because I wasn't, we didn't have strong examples of being like, hey, let's just like rest and have a nap before we go to this birthday party on like a Saturday afternoon or something like that. So,
Yeah.
and
I used
slowing
to
down
say those
doesn't mean
exact.
napping as well. It just was one example. But yeah.
Yeah. I used to
Mm,
say those exact words like all the time. I heard myself saying it. I was like, got
mm,
sick of myself saying it because it was just like, oh, the end point where I think I will be able to rest never actually comes. And it's up to you to draw that line.
mm,
And also what you just said made me think of this. I heard a lady on a podcast. I can't remember who it was because it was actually a video of a podcast on TikTok. So I have no idea who actually said this, and I'm sorry. But it stuck with me. She said, the only people who will remember, like in 20 years, 20 years from now, the only people who will remember that you worked late and checked your emails on the weekends are your kids or your loved ones, like the people
mm,
in your life who want your attention and
mm.
your energy and your love and everything. Like the people you work for, or even if you're working for yourself, like you're not going to look back and be like, oh yeah, I'm so happy I worked so fucking hard. Like you're just not. Like you're going to look back and be like, whoa, when did, like, I didn't spend enough time looking at my kid or like looking at a
Mm.
tree or fucking whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. And I had to have this conversation with my mum. Like she's could retire by the end of this year or within a few years. And she's just tired. Like, she's she's just amazing. And last year was quite an emotionally tumultuous year. Like we lost my dad, who was her ex-partner and obviously the father of her kids, and we had a few other deaths and roadblocks and everything. It was just like life threw everything at us last year. And then mum tried to I took a bit of, what is it, like compassionate leave or whatever, and tried to go back to work, which was, it's like a notoriously stressful job that she has. And she tried to go back to work, and I had to have a really stern chat to her and be like, Mum, you're just a number to that job. If you die tomorrow, they will literally replace you the next day. But you're also a mum and a daughter and an auntie and an uncle and a friend and everything. And we're the ones that are going to miss you if you make yourself sick purely from the chronic stress of this job. You know what I mean? Like a really big perspective shift of like, I know you want to do a good job, because there's probably that subconscious belief there that like her worthiness is linked to her level of productivity, or she doesn't want to let anyone down. There's like people pleasing tendencies in there, not specifically just for mum. I'm touching on any blockages or resistance you might have to slowing down. And there's like people pleasing tendencies, there's worthiness stuff there. But I was just like, no one can withstand a negative implication of chronic stress. And if you've got a job that stresses you out, I'm sorry, I don't care how good you are at that job. If you die, they will replace you tomorrow. But you've got friends, you've got family, and just like a relationship with yourself and relationship with nature and getting out and about. And I had to have that really stern chat with her. So that was just similar to what you're saying about like only your kids or your family are going to remember you checking emails late and stuff. And I had to like wave my arms at mum and be like, hey, like we're the ones that are going to miss you, not your job. You know,
I'm really glad.
if you passed away, which sounds like super morbid, but it was just like we had a really tough year and we just had to have some tough conversations and really, like, whether we liked it or not, pivot our relationship with everything in life. So including slowing down, because we had to grieve and fall apart and put ourselves back together and everything. So I hope
I
for
think
anyone that needs to slow down, it's for better reasons than what I had or what we've had, you know?
I
Listen to the
think it's
whispers.
really good that you said that to her and offered that perspective and everything. And I don't think it's morbid. It's important. I always think back to I think forward to an 80-year-old version of myself. And I remember the other week that I got that from my friend Shannon. She's done that the entire time I've known her. She's always just been like, well, when I'm 80, I'm going to be so proud of this and this and this. And so I guess, like, I met her in my early mid-20s, and I've just adapted that mentality because it's so helpful. And I offer it to my friends all the time as well. Even like I was talking to one of my friends and she was looking in the mirror or something and just being like, oh, I look so fat, I look so this and so that. And I was like, I'd already said this to her 100 times, by the way. I was like, when you're 80, if you see a photo of yourself right now looking the way that you look, you are not going to feel this way. Like, you're going to be like, what a fucking babe. Holy shit. Look at my body. Look at my hair. Look at my everything and my vitality. You're just going to see like this beautiful, energetic being with all these opportunities and amazing things you can achieve in the world. And I was like, you are not going to look back and feel how you feel now. So why feel that now? And sometimes people are like, oh yeah, that's true, but at that time she was just like, oh, I'm sick of hearing about when I'm 80, because I say it all the time. But really, that was just the part of her that wanted to keep living in that mentality of I suck, and she's not in there anymore, thank God. But I think it's a really important thing across life in general. Like, if you're feeling really stuck in something, if you're feeling like you're not good enough, you don't like yourself, you're beating yourself up in one way or another, like, that's only going to keep you stuck. And just picture yourself as an 80-year-old, like, picture your future, picture the people in your life that you love, and kind of like, it's not a morbid thing to be like, oh, like if I lost that person tomorrow, like, how would I feel? I think it really brings us back to what we really need to be focusing on, which is living a bit more in the moment. Even though it's like we're projecting a vision from, for the future or whatever at that moment, it kind of brings you back to the present and like, holy shit, am I in alignment with what I care about? Because that really kind of brings to the forefront of your brain your values. And if you think, okay, these are my values, I value, connection, I value kindness, I value exercise and being out in nature or whatever, I value like talking to my loved ones more and having time to be with them. If you value all those things, but you find that you never have time for them, that means that your actions are super out of alignment with your values. And life changes a lot when you start to pull your actions into alignment with your values. And you can't, you can, if you want, do it all at once in one big overhaul. If you have the ability, amazing. but a lot of people don't. So I think one of the important first steps to bringing your actions back into alignment with your values is a healthy morning and nighttime routine. So I can't really speak much for a nighttime routine yet because mine's not super healthy, but my morning routine is just bang on, and it helped actually change my life in the most amazing way. So shall I go into that, my morning routine, just in case it's helpful for someone else? I can just like dot point it because it's been like I've recommend the fuck out of it.
Yeah, totally. I do totally want to do an episode on like daily devotion and the importance of self-care and stuff too. So this could be like a little teaser for that.
Yes. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So, and I got this from like multiple. So the first thing was I was like, I just want to be outside. That was the main thing that was calling me, you know, be outside, be in nature and stuff. And I moved out of a horrible home into this like nice place by the water. And, you know, even if all you have is a veranda or just like a patch of sun or something, like just get yourself a bit closer to nature. And I think this has really helped with my circadian rhythm. So the first thing I would do is I would wake up, make my bed, always make my bed first. I just don't leave my room. That's like literally the first thing I do is I make my bed, and then I go into the bathroom, and after I've like peed or whatever, I brush. This probably sounds too detailed, but I brush my teeth and my tongue before I even have a sip of water, because your body will release a lot of toxins overnight and they sit on your tongue. So if you just, you know, drink a bit of water in the morning, you're just washing those back into your body, and then your stomach has to deal with that. So I always brush my teeth and my tongue first, and then I'll have like a big skull of water because I don't want to have coffee or food or anything like that as the first thing to touch my stomach either, because like my, you know, you just want to cushion your stomach lining with a bit of water. So then I'll make a turmeric tea and a coffee and some porridge, and I've got like a little picnic blanket and a picnic basket, and I'll carry all that downstairs, and I have a book obviously as well. And this is a no phone zone, as I don't look at my phone for the first like half an hour at least. Like I try and go as long as I can in the morning without looking at your phone, because that's just your brain is coming out of a theta state, and it's very like you can absorb so much stuff that you don't want to absorb. So looking at your phone is the first thing is really bad for you. It's also spikes your dopamine too early, and you crash earlier in the day. So stay the hell away from your phone in the morning. And so then I'm sitting outside. I'll read my book for like half an hour or whatever, sometimes an hour, depending on how much time I have, how early I've gotten up. And, you know, the sun's rising, like it's just the most beautiful thing. And I'll take some stillness and I'll stare at the water. I'll take breaks between reading and just sort of let it all sit. And then I come upstairs and start my day. And usually by that point, like either Noah's already up and he's getting ready, or I'm waking him up if it was summer and I've gotten up earlier. And I feel like giving myself that time and space in the morning to not have to parent or whatever. Like honestly, in summer I get up so early because Noah's still asleep, and I'm like, sweet, like this is my time. I can be like alone. I can, you know, ask like Justin and Noah if they are up to not bother me in that. Like don't interrupt me when I'm reading, that kind of thing. Like put up a boundary. It's really hard to put boundaries up with loved ones because you feel like you have to be there for them all the time, especially a kid and stuff. And you're just like, oh my God. And it's like, yes, be there for them and everything, but also you're still a human and an individual. You can actually ask someone else to look after the baby, or ask your kid to just let you read, whatever. But yeah, that time in the morning has just been so energizing. It's brought me back to myself. I'll journal. Sometimes I journal every day. Sometimes I journal just a couple of times a week. It just depends where I'm at. But getting your thoughts and feelings out, even just noting down what you're grateful for. And like I can achieve literally all of that in an hour if I need to. Do you know what I mean? Like you can do a condensed version or a slow version. So just waking up a little bit earlier so that you can do those sort of things for yourself is life-changing. It's actually life-changing.
And such a good role model for any other parents listening, because I think instinctively some parents would be like, oh, I don't have time, I've got a kid. And I'm like, you've got a kid, like only one, but you just make it happen. Because then when Esther comes back inside, like you said, it doesn't have to be like a picnic on the lake. You know, you're very lucky to have that. But even if you guys are just opening the window or sitting out on like a little veranda, Esther has that time, and then she comes back and she's completely regulated for Noah. And it's not those experiences that we were touching on at the start of the episode where you're running around, your mum's screaming at you, like throwing wheat bix at you, like, hey, quickly, like put your socks on.
Oh my God.
Socks. Maybe that was the era when we had like the toe socks. Remember in like the 2000s? Yes. And your parents are like, just fucking
You're like, I've got to do each toe at a time.
Yeah. So for any parent listening to this, like, oh no, that's too selfish, or I don't have time. Like you are doing, like you would doing a service to your partner or your children or anyone else that you have to interact with in the morning when you're coming in regulated. And of
Mm.
course, it's not going to be an hour sometimes, but Esther just had to start with the little things. And I'm really glad that you mentioned the whole technology thing, because I am obsessed with airplane mode too. Like, and airplane mode's not like I'm scrolling on bed right up until I go to sleep. Sometimes I'm airplane mode at like 6 or 7 at night, and people are texting me like, "Are we doing this thing tomorrow?" And then I like won't get it until tomorrow. I'm like, "Oh yeah, sorry, see you soon." But like, we don't have to be so available for everyone. So that is another way to start redefining your pace with life, is question your availability with everyone and make that airplane mode your favorite button. And
Yeah,
then as
turn
a
off
mentor,
notifications too. Fuck them off.
yeah,
You don't need to be notified about everyone's everything. Like if your
yeah,
self-worth is hinging on someone liking a photo or if someone's gotten
mm,
back to you or whatever, like
yeah,
that's another thing we need to work on.
yeah. Yeah,
So,
so I took my notifications off years ago. I just have text messages, obviously texts and calls now, but I have to actually go in, and my email as well, guys. I have to go into my Gmail, I have to go into Instagram to see all of those notifications. So this is where all those little micro things are really helpful. And I actually remember I had a previous client with Oasis State, and she was struggling with like an addiction to her phone and scrolling. And I gave her the advice of like, add as many steps in front of you. So I'm not wording this very well. Add like as many steps in front of you with your phone. So if you don't need an alarm in the morning, or maybe go and get like a cheap analog alarm from Kmart, don't even leave your phone on your bedside table or even in your room. I'm like, go and put it like in the kitchen, like utensil drawer, and turn it off and have it on airplane mode. So there was like 3 or 4 steps in front of her being like, so at 3 or 4 steps to be like, do I really want to do this? Do I really want to do this? But if you have your phone on literally within arm's reach, like mine's right here, it's not going to be long enough to question like, oh, do I want to scroll on social media? Whereas for her, it was bad enough that we had to be like, okay, let's put it out in a different room and turn it off. So even if she walked out to the kitchen cupboard and pulled it out, it's still off, and she could be like, do I want to go on my phone yet? Because then she still has to wait for the phone to turn on, and then you know what I mean. So
yeah, that's actually great advice
mm,
because back in the day, before the infinite scroll was invented, we used to be asked like, do you want to continue watching, kind of like how Netflix has it, like to continue watching thing. Like
mm,
YouTube used to have things like that. Google, you used to have to like, you would get to the end, you would have to like intentionally click to the next thing, but now it's like you can just scroll forever and ever and ever. And I think the infinite scroll was first developed for Google, and then obviously all of the other social media platforms took it on because they were like, how amazing. But what's happening there is humans are super easily drawn into situations where it's like you could just go down a rabbit hole or whatever or stay there. But if we're offered the choice, usually, and back in the day, like, you'd be like, oh, that's like, that just breaks you out of that zone for a moment to be like, no, you know what, I do need to actually get up and finish doing the washing or whatever,
mm,
whatever it is, the thing that you need to do. So it's like that moment of choice where like we don't actually have that really that much anymore. Like that's been taken away in as many places online as possible. And what you were obviously just offering her was that like moment of choice. Like, do I actually want to do that? Do I want to be looking on my phone right now? And half the time it's like,
oh, excuse
bless
me.
you. Like you don't actually want that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I
Yeah,
guess
so
like
we
also
can't sit
asking
back and
yourself.
yeah, you can't sit back and hope that technology will support like a good work-life balance, because it's not.
Yeah,
Like,
it's not
or
gonna.
yeah, exactly. And then in a personal realm, whether it's family or partners or friends or your boss or your colleagues or something, like, you need to ask for help. If you are literally terrified of slowing down, you need to start being authentic and honest with everyone and be like, I'm really struggling. Say to your partner, like, I just need you to take Bobby Joe, our kid, for like 5 minutes when you get home from work, so I can go and sit on the back porch and just take some deep breaths. So I hope you guys are feeling really inspired by Esther's morning routine. But I just wanted to invite you guys to just get really curious with what you want to do every morning. You don't have to go and follow her routine. It's more the act of doing it daily, like that consistency daily. But
Mm,
get really curious about what you actually want to do, because I think Esther and I are the same. I kind of file between what I need at the time, and then as
mm,
women, like I'm going like point into point into point here, but as women we are cyclical beings, so in different weeks of my cycle I will crave different things. So as long as I'm doing a morning routine, it's like sometimes I'm pulling cards, other times it's journaling, other times it's reading. And I just finished my book the other day and I need a new book. So I'm like not reading at the moment, but I've got my Audible. So when I'm working, I'm listening to a book, but you know what I mean? Like, just relax. You don't have to meditate for 2 hours every morning. Like, actually step into your individuality and be like, what do I need? Or try something and be like, nah, a static seated meditation is not for me. Maybe I need a guided meditation or a walking meditation or none of them at all. Like, you do you, boo.
Yeah, big time. And no guilt on the times when you can't. If you
Mm-hmm,
can't
mm-hmm,
achieve the
mm-hmm.
thing, don't beat yourself up about it, because that just takes it further away from you. Because then the next day you'll be like, what if I don't do it right again? And then you just like end up building this like wall between you and the end goal of just self-care, you know what I mean? So like, don't beat yourself up. If one day you can't follow that routine, chill. If you are doing the most vague version of it and you can't really do it to its full extent, chill.
Yeah.
It's fine. You're the
Take
boss
a
of your
chill
life.
pill. So there's one more thing from my end that I wanted to touch on. Was you guys might be sitting here like, yeah, but if I slow down, I can't get anything done. False. You're wrong. So all of getting in the driver's seat of redeveloping your relationship with like an intentional pace of life is just a really long-winded way of saying slowing down. Is redefining your relationship with success. And it absolutely blows my mind how much I can get done now that I have redeveloped my relationship with productivity in a healthy way. And like I
That's
said, like
amazing.
the little subconscious gremlins still come out, and I'll still like sort of put too much on my plate or experience little moments of guilt. But it's not about beating yourself up about that. Again, in terms of the daily routine as well, it's like you just have that self-awareness to not fully spiral down to like the bottom of the pits of like your self-worth. You're like, oh, actually, I'm putting a bit too much on my plate. Let's reassess. But for anyone sitting here being like, yeah, I can slow down, but like I'll never achieve anything in my life, it is absolutely not the case. It is crazy how much you achieve when you are actually regulated and you are doing something from a place of inspiration rather than stress and dysregulation and obligation.
Exactly. And you'll find that you actually do things that are more in line with who you are and what you actually want, because you've slowed down enough to figure it out. Like, you might realize, like, you might be like, yeah, no, I've got to like achieve this goal. It's the most important thing in the entire world for me and everything. And I can't slow down and do. You might like slow down and then give your brain and your mind and body and soul and everything enough rest to actually be like, oh, I'm called to do this thing now. And then all of a sudden your entire life changes. You don't want to do the other thing anymore. You want to do this thing now. And then you just snowball into alignment and then everything's amazing. So
Yeah.
just fucking give it a second, eh?
Yeah. So if anyone's there like, oh, I can't slow down, I'm a really ambitious person, like, so are we. Like,
Same,
we
yeah.
have no idea the magnitude of what we're going to achieve in this life. And we are constantly working towards that. But it's our relationship and our perception of the productivity and success that we have redefined. And like we said, even living and breathing this podcast, I'm like, we have worked so hard behind the scenes to get this done, but not one moment have I felt stressed or resistance to it. And we're still like, we're like pinching ourselves. Like we said at the start of the podcast, we're like, it can be fun, like, guys, like when you push through that veil of like, no, I can't slow down because I won't be successful. You're like, oh my God, I was
your
so
success
wrong.
definition is just redefined. Like, the things that I thought were so important literally last year, I now am like, oh, they are not important at all. I had it so wrong. But I would have been, I would have been hell bent on assuming that I had it completely right back then.
Yeah. And I would go as far to say that to me, my personal relationship with success, if I am achieving things externally, but it is at the detriment of myself, like whether that's my mental health, my relationships, like all of those things that go off kilter, because we have all of these different plates in life. So if you're really successful in that career area, but like your health is going down the drain, you don't have relationships, etc., etc., to me, that's not true success. But this is my definition of success. You jump in the driver's seat and define your relationship with it. But for me, for so long, it was so ingrained of like, I'm going to be successful, but it will be at the detriment of my mental health or my bank account or my relationships or whatever. So it's really nice to be in this new season of like, oh my God, I can actually have it all. And it's really easy.
It's so true.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I realized, so when I was slowing down, I kept having that like voice in my head, or that pull towards this like negative feeling of if you're not moving at a million miles an hour, and Zoe basically said this before, like it's equating your value to like how much you do or whatever.
Mm.
But I was always like, if I'm not busy, I'm lazy. If I'm not
Mm.
doing a million things, at once, I'm taking the piss. If I'm not completing everything I need to do and then also trying to find more to do because I'm like, well, I've done all this and there's still time. I always thought I would have to fill that time because otherwise I'm a piece of shit not doing my job or whatever. And it's
Mm.
like, that's so not true. Holy shit. Like if you're able to get your work done and then there's time, just exist in that time. What do you
Mm.
want to do? What's your reward for getting all the work done or whatever? If you slow down and you're not doing as much, that's awesome. That's the goal. And if you have that voice in your head just being like, oh my God, you're just being lazy or whatever, not true. That's
Mm.
just societal conditioning up until this point. And that is just, when you start working out of a tradition or out of a habit, or you're just working out of a mindset or whatever into this new territory, all kinds of things like people around you, your own ego, your own fear, all kinds of things are going to start like, struggling with that. It's like going to be this like push and pull, this tug of war where you're like, no, I'm moving in this new direction. And sometimes you'll feel like it's a bit difficult because it'll be like, oh, well, the people around me are acting as if I'm lazy, or like I keep telling myself I'm
Mm.
a piece of shit for this or whatever. But like push through that.
Mm.
That comes to an end eventually. And you start to be like, oh, and you can like stretch in it and be like, yes, this is actually so nice.
Mm. And I feel like, from my personal experience, and I'm sure you can comment as well, when I said before earlier in the episode that it gets worse before it gets better, I mean in the sense that when you finally allow yourself to stop and surrender to, a slower pace of life, you are going to be so exhausted for a while. And you
Yeah.
think that as
And
soon as you stop that you will be energized, but you have literally stressed yourself out mentally, spiritually, physically, emotionally for so long that it takes a while to unravel. And I remember that really surprising me on the other side of it, of like the more I rested, the tireder, the more tired I got. Um, so I just wanted to give that as a disclaimer for anyone else that like you need to be really kind to yourself, because even when you do allow that time to relax. So now I would only sometimes need 5 minutes to lay down. My partner and I call it like, oh, I'm just going to go get horizontal. So like he'll be downstairs, come home from like a skate or whatever. And he's like, oh, I just have to go get horizontal. So now that I'm regulated, it's just a matter of 5 minutes. But I just remember at the start when I was still navigating that burnout, I could like sleep all day and then I would get more and more tired. Don't worry. It's just everything recalibrating.
yeah. And adding to what Zoe just said, because
Mm.
that is so true.
Yeah, we've both experienced
When you,
it.
yeah, I think there's like an additional weight that eventually creeps in as well, because when you do create that much time for yourself, for your body to go into that recalibration state, you start to actually create space for all the parts of you that didn't have room to exist before.
Mm.
So you're like, things from your past start coming up. You start to just automatically move into doing a bit of like inner child work. And that's a bit like, surprising at first. And you're like, why am I randomly crying about stuff? And, you just feel like sometimes you're like, oh my God, like I just feel like the actual weight of the world is still on my shoulders, but you still know that you're doing the right thing and you know that it's going to be good. But you're definitely in this like winter season of just like, oh, everything's so thick and hard. And then as you start to come out of that, you start to really love all those different parts of yourself and all those parts that you've been keeping down underneath like years of being busy, years of, bad habits and avoiding alone time in your head and everything. Like you start to really love those parts of yourself, and you start to really hold yourself in a way of like, oh, I never had to run from myself at all because I was always there, and I love who I am, and I deserve good, and I deserve rest, and I deserve to be in a higher vibration and everything. And you start to just really hold your grief in your hands with you. You hold your shame, you hold the parts of you that you would cringe normally, like, and you just look at yourself and you're like, hey, oh my God, you poor baby angel, like you've just been living in there and I've been shoving you down this entire time, and now you finally have time to come up and you just want to be seen and you just want to exist alongside me. And that is honestly so beautiful. It takes your energy to go through that a bit, and it
Mm.
does take work, and it's nice if you have someone you can talk to through those times, but it's also nice to be alone with it and just know that it's actually so safe. And then when you
Mm.
feel really safe in who you are as a person, you build the most amazing trust for yourself, and you start to re-energize
Yeah.
because people don't affect you so much. The world doesn't affect you so much because you're so much more solid in who you are, and that beautiful gift that you move into, and that beautiful feeling can't exist when you're just going ahead like a steam train without
Mm.
stopping.
Mm. Yeah, and Esther and I are kind of in this season now of like coming out of the hermit mode, and we're like going out into the world, like rubbing our eyes, like, "Hey, everybody," like sort of thing.
Butterfly wings are cracking out of the
Yeah, we're like
cocoon.
out of the chrysalis, like we just like blended like so many analogies, but you get it. Um, yeah, and we're constantly surprised and blown away by our capacity now. And
Mm.
I think I mentioned on the previous episode, but in this time that we're recording this, I just went to Splendor Music Festival like a few days ago. And I was saying to Esther, like, I was so blown away with my capacity throughout the whole festival. And I was literally able to hold this deep feeling of groundedness and inner peace throughout the whole festival because I've been able to slow down and know who I am and, you know, touching on all those things Esther just spoke about. Whereas past versions of me that would have gone to the festival would have worked 9 to 5 or probably more. Like I used to work ridiculous amounts of hours and then jump in the car and rush down and camped all weekend. And I would have just been so overstimulated because I never ever took that time to slow down. And
Mm.
sorry if I'm repeating myself because I feel like I spoke about this on the previous episode, but prior to going to the festival on those days, I'm lucky enough to have a spa at home. So I jumped in my outdoor spa and had like loosened up my muscles. Um, I meditated. I set intentions for the festival that I was going to feel grounded, and I did yoga. Like because I know how to slow down, and because I know how to check in with myself and know what I need before I went back out into the world. So,
Yeah.
if you're at that point of slowing down and your lack of capacity scares you, it's okay. It's just temporary. You just need to honor that process. And now, like Esther and I say, we'll go out and we're like, I am so blown away with my capacity and my
Mm.
potential. You know, it's like it's so refreshing.
Oh, so true. You just
Yeah.
reminded me of something because
Mm,
it is mind blowing. It
mm,
is really refreshing. So
mm,
on the weekend, I was just taking some time. Like I was doing a lot of like I meditated a bunch and just was super enjoying my time alone. And I went to the beach and I was just like, you know, having this really, really, really peaceful day. And one of my friends messaged like, "Hey, babe, we're having a bit of a party tonight at the house. Blah blah blah. You want to come?" And I was like, "Thank you so much. I'll let you know." Like truly, like sounds nice, but I don't know how I feel yet. Just gonna let it sit.
mm,
And they all started the party and drinking and stuff like in the afternoon. And I was like, I'm not going to rush the decision either. Like, I'm not going to be like, come on, Esther, like, it's starting soon. Like, are you going to go or not? Like, because then I wouldn't be able to actually hear in my gut if I wanted to.
mm,
So I was like, if I end up going like a million years later, I don't give a fuck. Like, I'm just going to wait until I know. And just kept going about my business. And then I was in the shower and I was like, you know what? I feel like being around people. I feel like I have the energy for it. So I went and I got there and I was just met with the most amazing experience because like now that I have been putting so much like time and effort into myself and raising my vibration and really getting into alignment and everything, I'm so much more magnetic. Like, and everyone is so much more drawn to me. And the thought of that initially is like, oh, panic. I don't have the energy for it because I haven't had energy in so long. And I'm like, you know, so scared of burnout and blah. But then I was like, oh, like this isn't draining me. Like I don't feel drained at all by this. And I felt like I was able to keep energetic
mm,
boundaries up and I actually was able to give out love and it was received in the most amazing way. Like I took 2 steps in that house and I had friends and people that, you know, sometimes don't even like talk to me all that much, just literally pulling on my arms to turn me around and be like, ah, and like hug me and be like, oh my God, what have you been doing? And I couldn't take like 3 steps to another part of the room to try and say hi to someone else without 4 more people being like, oh my God.
yeah.
And I was having all these like deep and meaningful conversations just randomly, like 10-minute conversations. Like they weren't that long, but they were really deep, really quickly. And people were just like talking to me about stuff and I was asking them questions. And the next thing you know, like we would talk about something and I would just say like that right thing. And then they would stop and just like hug me and thank me and all that stuff. And I just remember feeling so surprised on the way home by how not draining that was. So there was a lot of other feelings that I was feeling just like, oh my God, magnetic. Oh my God, I'm killing it right now. Like I was really excited and just like wanting to give love to all of those people, like really wanting to connect with them properly because I've actually got the space for it. I've got the energy for it. But yeah, I woke up the next morning and I literally smiled because I was like, I thought about it straight away and I was like, wow, like I feel amazing. And that was fun. Like that was fucking fun. And I
Yeah.
went home at a reasonable hour and went to bed. And when I was leaving, they were like, don't go. Why are you leaving? And I was like, I'm done. And they were like, okay, guess I'm not going to argue with that. And I was like, yeah.
Yes. I did that at Splendor too, because my friends I were with were going to like a what do you call it, like a flow-on party, like an after party. And I was like, abso-fucking-lutely not. I'm going home. But I was also like going to Splendor on multiple days. But
yeah,
I
still couldn't after party. No fucking, I'm not there
yet.
I don't think I want to.
No. So, but yeah, it's like it's not about the choices. It's more that like we're blown away by how easy it is to check in with yourself and be like, yeah, I'm done. You know what I mean? Like we're not running away from anything. We're not dysregulated. And when you're dysregulated, guys, you're not making the right choices. You literally have no idea who you are.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I know we're talking about like, oh, it's going to get a bit hairy when you first decide to do it, but you need to slow down like your life depends on it, because it does.
It does.
And you need to very softly, not softly, like just lean in to all of that stuff on the other side of it, and just be so kind to yourself, because it is so worth it to be where we are now. And, you know, we're not experts in it. We can literally only speak for our personal experience, but oh man, we just know all of that, you know, societal conditioning, those triggers, being a female as well, like just all of that stuff. And I suppose the other thing I wanted to touch on was like, there would be a few times where I'd be like, I'm ready. And then I wouldn't be. And I'm like,
and then you beat yourself up and you were like, I'm not ready. I remember.
But yeah, I suppose like on top of us slowing down, we've, like you said, sometimes it initiates this really deep, potent healing, because all of that was just there and you weren't paying attention to it. But I kind of realized like, oh, those moments where I thought I was ready, which was probably just a spike in my energy anyway. But I also think it was a little bit of that toxic conditioning coming back in, and it was my mind and my schedule trying to get me back on track. But it doesn't work like that. Your body is running the show. Your body, your nervous system, your emotions are running the show, and your spirit, because that's what your soul, that's what you're connecting to when you're slowing down. They are running the show moving forward. So if you ever feel like you have this false start getting back out there, it could just be your mind tricking you like, no, you've had enough rest now. You're all good. Like, all right, go. Like, get back out there. And that happened to me a few times. And then I was like, oh no, my body's keeping the score, but my mind still got that conditioning. My ego still thinks it's in the driver's seat, and it just doesn't work like that anymore. So just be really kind to yourself if you're trying to, like, if you're feeling that anxiety about like, because you can slow down and still be drowning in guilt about it.
Yeah, which is just so draining.
Yeah, exactly.
Drains the energy.
Yeah.
If you think about like what Zoe said about like your body's running the show and everything, think about your brain as a filter, and imagine information going from the ground up, like through your body. Your body has information sending it up to your brain through your enteric nervous system and your vagus nerve and everything. So your gut brain is like the one communicating with your body, and that's sending it up to your brain in your head, your central nervous system. And also then picture your consciousness, your soul, that sort of stuff, like hovering above your head, wanting to come down through your brain as well, and then like into your body and stuff like that. So imagine your brain as a filter, and your brain is filtering the information coming from your body and coming from your soul and consciousness and stuff. And its main priority is to keep you alive, obviously. So it's going to go survival before anything else. So if you're living in a state of like, you know, a dysregulated nervous system, and you're in fight or flight, and you're just like constantly stressed and everything, your brain is like, sweet, okay, we obviously are in a bad state right now. We need to survive. It's not going to let your body's messages up through into your central nervous system, and it's not going to let your soul really guide your life into the place that's like best for you to go, because it's just like, no, we don't have time for that right now. We're filtering everything of that out, and we're just focusing on survival. So your brain is literally in survival stage, survival mode. So when you slow down and you're able to even just implement the little micro things like a morning routine, a night routine, less time on your phone, stuff like that, a bit more stillness in the moments that you can, even if you're just on a lunch break, read a book instead of being on your phone, something like that, stare at the sky, I don't care, like do something, because all those little moments compound, and your brain starts to recognize that you're not in fact dying, and you're not in survival mode, and you don't need to be. So it will start to let the other messages through. It starts to like widen the filter, and you can actually receive the information that you need from your guides, your higher self, your body, like everything. Slowing down is just, oh my God, it's so important.
Damn, it's the best drug you can take, baby.
Yeah. Also, I wanted to touch on this other thing. It made me think just then. I've been off Instagram now for it's 11 months. So next month will be the 12th, like 1 year off Instagram. And the reason I deactivated it was because I just felt cluttered in my head at the time. And this was when I first started recognizing that I was in this place of really needing to slow down, when everything started to just scream at me. And like Zoe said, if you don't deal with the whispers, you'll deal with the screams. So I was being screamed at in every direction. And one of the things was just like, I just felt like I could just cringe. Like I would open my phone trying to go to like just a text message to send to a friend. My thumb would automatically hit Instagram. And then I was just like, whoa, I recognized I had such an addiction there. And I was, I started to get really frustrated with that. And I was like, oh my God, it's almost like I could literally hear the 8 billion people in the world coming through my phone into my brain. And I was like, oh my God, I cannot fit a single external thought in here anymore. Like I just needed to shut it the fuck out. So I deactivated my Instagram, and I had this like fear at first of just like, oh my God. And Instagram was the one that was keeping me hooked to my phone for me, because like I have a community there. Like I've got friends like Group Chat Central. I've got, like anyone who knows me and anyone I know, we all exist on Instagram together. You know what I mean? Like that's where you get the information to where everyone's going to be hanging out or whatever. And at first I was like, oh my God, and like that FOMO kind of kicked in, and I was like, I'm going to miss out on so much and people are going to forget that I exist and blah, blah, blah. And then I was like, you know what? Who gives a shit? Like, you need this more than anything. I don't give a fuck. If everyone literally forgot my fucking name, I was like, I don't care. I need to look after myself and putting myself first. And I really just don't give a shit about the repercussions of what this might be. And anytime that feeling came up, I just reminded myself of that feeling of like, no. And the actual, like the reality of it was that friends would just start texting me and being like, hey, you're not on Instagram. And I was like, oh yeah, I've deactivated it. And every now and then they would joke and just be like, oh my God, it's so annoying, you're not on Instagram. I can't like send you the thing. Or I forgot that you don't know that, I posted this thing on my story and you don't know that I've done that. So when they tell me, I'm like so excited. And then I just said to everyone, I was like, just like text me random videos and photos if you want. Like you don't have to even give me a precursor. I just send it. I still want to see about your life, because these are the people who have my number. These are the people I actually want to be talking to. So they started doing that. And I have not missed out on anything that I've wanted to do. I have not missed out on a single thing. Anything that I really have wanted to do, I have gone and done, and people have invited me to, and I haven't missed out on anything, but I have gained so much. I gained so much energy. I gained so much self-assurance. I stopped comparing myself to other people, which, oh my God, literally life-changing. Everyone's like, don't compare yourself to other people. But like when you're on Instagram, that's literally like Instagram's goal is like, hey, compare yourself to this person so that you hate yourself so that then you buy this product. So like it's all centralized around advertising. Like we are the product and the business is advertising. Do you know what I mean? So it's just such a toxic place to be. And I'm not saying remove yourself and your life from Instagram forever. I'm going to get back on it eventually. Like I've got a couple of like, I work in marketing. I have to be on it every now and then, but I do as many things as I can to not actually actively be on the app on my phone, like setting up systems where the posts are automated and stuff. And I just do that once a month. So I stopped comparing myself. I started as a creative, I stopped looking at what everyone else was creating, thinking, oh, I'm not creating good enough. I'm not creating like that thing and that's what's trending and la, la, la. Like I stopped doubting all that. I started creating from what's within me. That was one of the biggest gifts I could give myself. I don't have all the self-body, whatever image issues that I used to have. Like I was already pretty good at that. I got to a place of feeling pretty neutral about my body, but it would creep back in and, once a month or whatever. And I'd be like, have to deal with like hating myself for a second. And I don't have that anymore. Now, if that happens, it's like once every 6 months or whatever. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's stupid. And it's just, the space, the fucking space. We don't need to know what everyone's doing all the time. It's so bad for us. It's not how we're supposed to live. We're not wired for that shit. We're supposed to be in like smaller communities and everything. And if you feel like you're addicted to your phone, if you feel like your brain is full of way too much information, if you feel like you hate yourself most of the time, if you feel like you're never good enough and you're always like comparing yourself to someone, and even in this kind of situation that we're talking about, slowing down, if you feel like, oh, other people would be able to slow down, but I wouldn't because of XYZ, or like my life is really hard and shit because of whatever. And like, I just feel like if you spend time off Instagram and off, comparing yourself to other people, you're going to find that you have everything you need inside yourself, and you have the power and the ability and the control over your own life to make it exactly what you want. Even if it takes like a trickier road to get there, it's just better than the road that we're all on, and we're walking in the wrong direction. You know what I mean? And it's time to correct course.
Yeah, honestly, I feel like you just touched on so many important things just there. And if anyone's listening to this, like, yeah, no, but like I can't slow down, like fuck off. Sorry, you're not
Yeah, I feel
special.
like I can't leave Instagram
Yeah,
because that's where our
you're not
friends are.
special. Your job isn't more important than anyone
Get
else's. Your
WhatsApp.
family isn't more important than anyone else's. Everyone's experience is exactly the same. And like Esther said, we are not wired for the capacity that we're at the moment. So yeah, just be mindful of that story that your brain or your ego might be bringing in, like, oh no, but I can't. Like, no, you're not special. Sorry, you can slow down, and your life depends on it. And I'm really glad that you touched on the whole social media thing of you didn't lose anything, but you gained so much. So yeah,
Thanks.
because I had a good break from Instagram around from when Dad passed away the end of last year, and I just fully went so insular, and I closed down my business and got off social media and everything. So yeah, I kind of moved through all of that too. But I've since relaunched my business, and now we've got Vision and Alchemy. So I run the Instagram, and Esther's on the TikTok. But it's like after having that break, it's good to come back and have those healthy habits again, because you like take yourself away from it and then be like, no, I'm spending too long on this now. So yeah,
It's like being in a toxic relationship. It's like when
mm,
you're in the relationship, the person's making you think that like you're not good enough and that you
mm,
can't leave them because you'll never find anyone else. And, you know, like you just have to stay with them because you've been with them so long already that you may as well. And like, why bother fucking leaving? Because, you know, you've put this much effort in until this far. I think being like on Instagram or whatever is kind of like that. And when you finally get out of that relationship, you look at it from this other perspective of like, whoa,
yeah,
holy shit, I don't ever want to be in a relationship like that ever again. Like I deserve so much better. And like when you have a break from it, you can kind of see it for what it is. And you're like, ooh, this is actually, it's both a phenomenal tool and a very dangerous tool.
mm,
You have to have a lot of awareness around it.
yeah, exactly. But yeah, I feel like this episode could flow onto, because as soon as you started talking about survival mode, I'm like, oh my god, why didn't we talk about surviving and thriving? And then I think there's more self-care stuff we could touch on as well. So maybe that'll, like, if it hopefully it doesn't like cross over too much. But yeah, I just feel like there's so much we can talk about in this realm, because there's different parts of it. But yeah, it's a big theme, moving from survival mode into thriving. And just I feel like Esther and I would be really good at kind of pulling out the bits and pieces that get you there, um, sort of thing. And just like the importance of self-care and stuff as well. So there's probably going to be like another self-care related episode with this. But for
Mm,
now, it's like just the slowing down part of it, because I suppose we've addressed like the initial bits, like that resistance that you might feel towards it, why you shouldn't feel the resistance, and little things you can start doing to get
mm,
to start moving that slowing down process, what to expect in the middle of it, and why it's so worth it, because it's just absolutely amazing to be on the other side of this. And I was thinking as well, if you are really stuck in a loop, and like we said, sometimes you just need to remember to breathe. This is where affirmations will be really important too. So if you haven't had the ability to slow down for a really long time, I can bet your bottom dollar you don't feel safe, or you're lacking some sense of security, and that's very root chakra related stuff. So if you just wanted to like maybe pick up an affirmation that really suits you, along the lines of like, I am worthy and safe to rest, like, or I am safe to be still. And just because that's going to slowly start shifting your subconscious, because your subconscious beliefs can be shifted, but it does take time. And maybe I'll do like a mindset episode where we can both riff on this, because that's kind of where my professional background is. But yeah, just remember that like if you've got that monkey mind as well from being so dysregulated and so busy for so long, one of the most potent ways internally to start that slowing down process is just really to lock into an affirmation. And I think intuitively it will be safety related, because your root chakra is going to be all over the place, and you just need to remind yourself, I'm safe and worthy of slowing down. I'm safe to be still. I'm safe to rest. I'm supported to be
mm.
still and rest and slow down. So hopefully some of those little, like, you could write it down yourself, but we spoke about the breath thing as being like the one thing you can control. But even if you're sitting at your desk in your like 9 to 5 job and really stressed out, you're the only one that has the power to choose what you can think about. And if you've got that
Yeah.
monkey mind from being dysregulated, start choosing some affirmations to slowly like retrain your mind.
Yeah, that's such a good point.
Yeah.
100%. That is
Mm.
so important. For me, some of them were like, I'm calling in balance.
Mm.
I want to progress in all these different ways, but with balance at the forefront. Like, or I would list my values in my head. So because like that was one of the first things that started to help me, was to remember the things that were important, like I said earlier. So if I was feeling really panicky and shaky and my nervous system was feeling a little bit like, oh, and I'm feeling stuck and wanting to move out of the shitty area into like a place of balance, but I wasn't quite physically there yet, like one of my things would be just running through what I value in my mind. Like, I value family, I value balance, I value connection, I value community, I value love and gratitude. So I was watching Stutz, this like movie. Jonah Hill did this thing with his therapist, and his therapist is actually like such a beautiful angel of a human being and so smart and wise, and oh my God. So this Stutz guy was saying that where like gratitude exists, things like fear and ego can't really live in that moment as well. So if you're feeling like there's a massive storm cloud above you and you can't see the blue sky and you're just like, oh my God, and that storm cloud is like weighing down on you, it's getting lower and lower, and there's just less and less space between you and, you know, the sky and the universe and everything. What you can do is start thinking of something that you're grateful for, even if your life is so hard in that point that it's hard to think of anything and you're just like, oh my God, like, you know, feeling like you're going to give up or something like that. Like, if you think of just something that you're grateful for, it's almost like a balloon will just come into your hand, like a balloon on a string, like with helium in it. And then you think of like another thing that you're grateful for. That balloon then will start to carry you up above the clouds and you start to see the blue sky again. And then you kind of feel yourself getting on a roll. You're like, oh, I'm also grateful for this and I'm grateful for this. And then you're above the clouds, even if it's not every moment of the day, you know, even if it's just that little bit of time that you're above the clouds and you're looking at the blue sky, thinking of what you're grateful for. That is actually really powerful for your energy and your nervous system and for your habits and everything. Like, that feeling gives you something to chase. And it's like, oh, the sky is so nice up here. And then, you know, maybe you do lower back down under the clouds and everything, but then you remember to do that the next day. And then in time, those clouds start to clear. And then it just, next thing you know, you're looking out the window like, what a beautiful day. And you're like, whoa, me last year, like, wouldn't have even registered how nice the day was because it
Yeah.
wasn't, you know?
Yeah, so it is those little moments, like little affirmations or a little gratitude practice of like there's always something to be grateful for, and then all of a sudden it's like a huge part of our day.
Yeah.
like as in, like, you know, say a year or so down the track or whenever it is, it's like I just can very effortlessly exist from this space of gratitude, and it is
Yeah.
so, it's energizing.
It is. It's a
Yeah.
higher vibration. If you exist in gratitude more than anything else, like you're just going, like your vibration is higher. People can see you and hear you and feel you from
Yeah.
further off.
Yeah, exactly.
It's incredible.
I hope that's landed for you guys.
Yeah.
I feel like there was a lot in there, but it's so cool. It's like everyone's going to resonate with something different, depending on where they're at with their journey and their relationship with slowing down. And yeah, and like I said, I feel like this is going to flow into another episode related to like survival mode stuff or self-care as well, because it's such a huge part of moving forward in your life on your own authentic path.
Yeah. And like, just know that Zoe and I we've had like pretty big lives and we've gone through all kinds of different things. We've had to process all kinds of things. So if you're feeling like alone and you're like, oh my God, like life is so hard right now, or just, you know, you get easily knocked down and it's so hard to get back up and you're just feeling all kinds of stressed, and just know that like you are not alone, right? Like we've all got different versions of that same kind of feeling, and you can get out of it. And like, I just want to send out like a lot of love and a big hug. Like, just imagine me coming up behind you and just wrapping my arms all around you and just being like, "Meh," and a big bear hug, and transferring some good energy to you, because you deserve it and you're going to be fine. Like you will climb out of it.
Exactly. And that's, you know, one of the many reasons we started this podcast, is because we want every one of these processes and experiences that Esther and I have been through to be slightly easier on everyone else. It's like we had to go and do all the hard parts to be like, nope, not that way. Nope, not that way.
Yeah.
And now we're turning around like, so probably try and do it this way.
Yeah.
But we don't know everything. We're just speaking from our personal experience. But yeah, guys, if you're struggling, our DMs are always open. We hope that this podcast serves as like a companion and a support and an inspiration for you, because yeah, it's a wild ride, but oh my God, it is so worth it. It is so worth it, guys. Every single ebb that you're in, is worth it, because when you get back to the flow, you're like,
oh, you just reminded me of something. The ebbs and the flows and everything, and it being worth it. It is. It's so worth it. Just another little hot tip. When you're circulating around an issue and you're in that monkey mind and it's just like the fucking cymbals are clapping and you're like da-da-da-da-da and a lot of chatter and you're okay, so you're in that state, think, all right, what is it that I'm anxious about right now? And if you like can't think of any specific thing, just be like, all right, life might be a lot right now, whatever. What you can do is start to try and identify the lesson that you're currently learning. So I think that's a really big thing that helps me, because it shines the light on the problem and it takes you out of the victim seat and into the empowered seat of like being able to drive the vehicle. So if you're like, all right, I'm feeling really anxious, I'm feeling really stressed, or there's a problem in your life and you just keep circulating around that same thing, just being like, how do I get out of this issue? La, la, la. Instead of being like, this thing's happening to me and oh my God, how do I get myself out of this? Just step back for a second and look at your situation from a bird's eye view, as if you're scanning for the lesson, because life will be teaching you something that's going to help you in your future for your path. And identifying what the lesson is just so empowering. And then you actually like can move through it, get past it, take the necessary steps to correct course and get back onto a path that's better for you. And like just being able to identify the lesson while you're in it is so powerful.
Yeah. And usually you learn the lesson and then all of your external environment starts shifting once you learn the lesson.
Legit. Yeah. It just happens.
Yeah. But yeah, guys, we're sending you so much love. Obviously we've got a lot to talk about, and I'm like, even as we're kind of wrapping this episode up, I'm like, oh, that could be another episode. That could be another episode. So yeah, but it's all intertwined. That's why we're all talking about it. But thank you so much for locking in for this juicy episode with us. It has been an absolute delight with producing it, creating it.
Yeah.
With you.
It's been so nice existing, and we're glad that you love us.
Yeah. Basically. Oh, yay.
Cool.
Well, yeah. Thanks for tuning in, guys. We'll see you on the next episode. Lots of love.
See you next week. Bye.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Vision and Alchemy. If this episode resonated with you, we'd love you to share it with a friend. Your support means everything to us. If you'd like to subscribe to our journey, follow us at Vision and Alchemy on socials, and we'll see you next time.